Thank you for joining us today. I am honored to have Attorney General Steve Marshall with me, and has just spoken at a breakfast that we've had and given us some great insight on some topics that impact us all within the state as well as throughout the nation. We greatly appreciate you being here, Attorney
Oh, thank
General.
you for having me here.
So thank you very much. So you brought up some incredible points today, and we see it. You and I were having a conversation about in the financial planning aspect. You know, people where may have a family member that, you know, in terms of drugs,
Right.
you know, and that's become a topic. So I wanted, with the viewers we have here today, to, you know, what is your perspective, if you would share with them, you know, of the impact of drug usage on Alabama business and just as a state as a whole. You've done some great work in that area.
Well, clearly the opioid issue is one that we deal with nationally. We've heard the statistics, and it's the loss of life, which I think has really captured everybody's attention when we know that our deaths in this country have escalated substantially as a result of overdose.
Right.
And so it's a public health issue, it's a law enforcement issue, and it's one that impacts businesses and families across Alabama. And, you know, unfortunately, we're on the front line when we look at opioid per capita prescriptions.
Sure.
And also the loss of life, but yet we now have a 27-point plan going forward. We've seen a 23% reduction over the last 5 years of our opioid prescriptions. I think public awareness has been raised,
Right.
and at least a discussion now about removing the stigma of getting help. And so when we're reaching out to families, it's really one of not only educating them on what we can do,
Right.
but also about the fact that there are opportunities to be able to get help, because this is an issue, again, not only nationally, but in Alabama, we got to get a handle on, but it's one that will impact positively small business in the state, to make sure that we increase the opportunities for those who want and need to seek employees, that they can have a qualified work base, but also to make sure that we address a problem that's impacting families in a profound way.
Yeah, well, and could you elaborate just on what you shared about how states now are communicating with each other? I thought that was very insightful.
One thing that we know, we obviously border several states around us, and there's a database that we keep in Alabama that has prescribing history. One of the things that doctors want to do is to make sure that when you come for knee pain, that you haven't been to another doctor 2 days before for back pain, or to a dentist and complaining of tooth pain. And so many of our communities in Alabama border Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee. And so crossing the border does not need to be a key for somebody drug seeking to be able to get help. And so the ability for Georgia to communicate with Alabama, for Florida to communicate with Alabama, and vice versa, allows us to be able to identify those who are truly seeking these drugs for addiction and not for their medical services. And so that's one of the things that we've worked on from Alabama, is to be able to raise that issue nationally, and I think we're seeing some progress there.
That's great. Well, another issue that you talked about, and all businesses are dealing with, you know, cybersecurity. You know, what impact has the Alabama Data Breach Notification Act of 2018 had since it's, you know, was passed this year?
Well, Alabama was the last state in the country to be able to pass a bill, which really was to be able to allow consumers, those of us that they either have credit cards or provided our financial information to other third party and businesses, that if there's a data breach, for us to simply be notified that potentially we could have our identifying information being supplied to third parties for bad reasons. And so, you know, developed a bill that we think was responsible, working with business and consumer advocates to make sure that Alabama consumers were protected. And so we've seen already data breaches that have occurred nationally where that notification took place. Our consumer advocates have had the opportunity to be able to work with those that have called with questions, and to be able to give them the resources they need to be able to protect their identifying information. Again, it's a way of making sure that Alabama consumers are informed in the right way,
Absolutely.
and that we do it responsibly.
That's great. And then last question here, because I could talk to you all day long. I don't know if our viewers realize all the things that you're involved in and for the state, and we appreciate that, by the way. But in terms of the focus of the Alabama Office of the Attorney General in 2019, what would you say your focus, because it's hard to believe we're getting ready to wrap up 2018 fairly quickly here, going into next year. What would you say your focus would be there?
Yeah, our focus are on those issues that really impact the quality of life for Alabamians and the business climate of this state. And it's why we'll continue to work on the opioid issue. We'll be talking about the question of violent crime in Alabama and what we can do to be able to reduce that. We continue to have a focus on public corruption and make sure that people have trust in their government. But beyond that, we also need to make sure that we're involved in those fights outside of Alabama that impact the business climate in this state. And so we'll be continuing to make sure that we remind the Trump administration the promise they said to rescind much of the regulatory overreach that we saw during the Obama administration, to make the progress when they are reducing 33 regulations for every one they adopt. That's a positive thing.
Yes.
And so we'll continue to work with my colleagues around the country to make sure that we're involved in those issues that affect Alabama businesses.
Well, we can't thank you enough because from the legal aspect, it can have a huge impact on the economy, which in turn that rippling effect on markets, and that also can have an impact on businesses and financial plans of individuals throughout the state. So we thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for being so active and involved.
It was my
So
privilege
thank you
to serve.
very
So
much
thank you.
and appreciate you being here today. So on that note, we hope you have a great week, and we will keep you informed, and I hope that you found this to be very beneficial and information that you can utilize in your life and business. Thanks again for joining us.